Good morning. Today we read chapter 9 of Mark, verses 30 through 50. And Jesus is talking with his disciples. And it says, as they went on from there and passed through Galilee, he didn't want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. And what was he teaching them? He was telling them for the second time here in the Gospel of Mark that he is going to be betrayed, that he will be mocked and crucified. They will kill him after 3 days. I mean, he'll rise again. He's speaking that quite plainly. And I have that underlined in this Bible. I think I've probably got it underlined in most Bibles with the words written that I wrote in the margin, Jesus knew. And it's just a reminder to us that as Jesus did all of this ministry on earth, as he taught his disciples, as he healed the sick, as he cast the demons out, as he was doing God's work, he knew what God's work was going to entail. He knew the final result for him of God's work. And Mark tells us that after Jesus said this, he said, verse 32, but they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. And, I can understand that being afraid to ask him. I mean, why would you want to know any more details when your leader, when this person that you're following, when this person that says he is the Messiah and you've become to believe that he is the Messiah tells you this, why would you question? Why would you want to know more? I mean, it's just, something that doesn't make sense. And then it says, as they came to the house at Capernaum, and this again is where Jesus made his home port for the most part. And he asked the disciples, what were you arguing about on the way as we walked? Because they would talk among themselves, and I'm sure Jesus didn't talk all of the time. But it says they were silent. They didn't want to admit to Jesus what they were talking about, but he knew. It says, for they were arguing with one another about who was the greatest. I mean, and I can understand that. We all want to be great. We all want to be good at what we do. We all want people to look at us and say, that was a good job or whatever. We like those accolades, those pats on the back and those things that way. But, these disciples were wondering who's the greatest. And the reading for Sunday, actually, Sunday morning in chapter 10, two of the disciples will come to Jesus and say, we want you to grant us to sit one on the right hand and one on the left. I mean, they wanted these places of position. And other Gospels kind of have that all tied together. But, here, they were arguing about who was the greatest. Maybe some of that comes in, who does Jesus like best? And maybe you remember as kids or your kids, mom likes me best, or saying the other way around, well, you always liked my brother better, or we have those positions of power, positions of prestige we want. And then Jesus kind of throws cold water on him. He says, whoever wants to be first must be last, must be a servant of all. And Jesus, ends up modeling that for us and for them. I mean, later on we're going to find again that Jesus, on the night he's betrayed, will wash the disciples' feet. The task of a servant as someone comes in to visit. It was the servant's task to wash the feet, to welcome them. And Jesus models that. You got to be a servant. You got to put other people ahead of you. And that is so often so hard. I mean, we can't totally diminish ourselves, but we don't elevate ourselves above others either. We need to find this even keel in how we act and respond to those others around us. And Jesus, brings a small child in, and he takes it in his arms and says, whoever welcomes a child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not only me, but the one who sent me, welcomes God. And then Mark switches the tangent again. He says, teacher, we saw somebody casting out demons in your name. And we tried to get him to stop, because he was not one of us, And And I can see that happening too, they're a little bit jealous. And, it's just like, sometimes a new pastor comes to town or a new church open, in some of our small communities, we don't see a new church spring up, but all of a sudden, somebody is listening to a new voice, and there's some of that jealousy. And that's what the disciples were feeling here. They were jealous for Jesus in a way, but they were remembering that Jesus had sent them out. But here there's somebody else that, he's not following us. But Jesus says, don't stop him, for whoever does a good deed of power in my name won't be able to soon speak ill about me. And this doing work in God's name, if you remember, or maybe you don't, but way back in the book of Numbers, Moses, during the Exodus, Exodus and Numbers are, they're calling it history books in an awful lot of ways, but in the book of Numbers, in chapter 11, Moses was getting fed up with the people because they kept coming to him and complaining about, God, and rather than, and God says to Moses, I tell you what, you find 70 people and you bring them in, and I will allow a part of the Spirit I've given you to rest upon them so that they can prophesy, they can hear, and they can help. And this happened, and two of these men, Eldad and Medad, it seemed like in them the Spirit wasn't just there and then gone, but the Spirit remained. And some of the others came to Moses and said, so don't you care? These guys are doing this, And it says, these guys are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, one of Moses, the one that, succeeded him, one of his most loyal ones, says to Moses, my Lord, Moses, stop him, Just like here, the disciples come to Jesus and say, hey, this guy is doing good work in your name. We got to stop. No, Jesus said, no. Whoever is not against us is for us. Those are Jesus' words. Whoever is not against us is for us. And, and then he says, truly, this is how small an act that can be God's work. Whoever gives a glass of water in my name will by no means lose a reward. So just, and later Jesus said, he talks about, the separating of the sheep and the goats, whoever gave me a drink of water, whoever clothed me, whoever visited me in prison. So here, whoever gives a drink of water in my name has done my work. It's that simple. It's sometimes that hard. We want to do major things. We want to be the center. We want to have, but Jesus says it's not always in the big acts. It's in the small acts of kindness that God's love comes. It can be just as much God's love shown in a small act of kindness. And then he goes on and he says, whoever puts a stumbling block, in front of you, better if you cast a weight around your ankle and toss it in the sea, you cut your hand off, you cut your, it's, Jesus is saying, small acts of kindness are doing God's work. But sometimes if we get in the way, often, most of the time, if we get in the way of someone else doing good works, we're causing trouble for ourselves and for everybody else. Rather than see somebody doing good works and getting jealous about it, when you see somebody doing good works, when you see somebody doing a good thing, encourage them, help them, step right up to the plate. And the last thing in here in this chapter, Jesus says, verse 49, for everyone who will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its saltiness, how can you season it? So he says, have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. Well, salt in today's society, salt doesn't lose its saltiness. Salt is salt, doesn't matter what, But I think Jesus is saying, be content with who you are, and that you can flavor the world, Salt adds flavoring. And but be content with who you are. Know that you are a distinct person, that there is no one else just like you. Even if someone else may look like you, they are not just like you, but be who you are and be true to yourself. And salt can't be anything other than salt. It's true to itself. And I think that's what Jesus is saying in some ways, to be true to yourself this day and always be looking out so that you can help with doing God's work. May he richly bless you with some sunshine and love today.